You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today's show is going to be very unique in terms of comparing to all my prior episodes. A few weeks ago, we crossed the Rubicon and the milestone of publishing our 300th episode. And several interesting things happened for me as a podcast host. First, I want to say thank you. I got some very warm and heartfelt acknowledgement of that announcement that we had crossed over episode number 300. So for faithful listeners and followers who have taken the time to drop me a note and say something about it, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being there and being a faithful follower of the show. But I also started getting some nudges, I will say. It's maybe some would say the universe was speaking to me. There was a challenge that kind of got laid down. One of my other podcast world colleagues published a coincidental article about his own show and the fact that he had finally mustered the courage to try to do a single seat show. In other words, he was going to talk and not have a guest. He would be the only voice and face on this show. And I took that challenge to heart, so that's a long story to say. That's what we're going to do today. I'm going to share some ideas with you and some things that have been on my heart as I've had the wonderful and amazing blessing to meet 300 guests that I've had on my show, 300 plus. And we certainly have some more shows coming up in our production queue and some more great quality guests that are going to join me on the talk here. But today, I want to just kind of recap some thoughts, maybe hit some highlight points, kind of play. I won't literally be replaying some videos of some of my guests, but I'm going to kind of walk down memory lane and think about some of the contributions that others have made to the show and lessons I certainly learned talking to those folks. But I think to start everything off, if you've followed this show for a while, I have made it clear that my passion and my purpose is helping people think about ways to become better leaders. I have said it many times before, and I will say it yet again and probably keep saying it. Our world is in need of good, honest, genuine leadership. We don't need people in authority with agendas. We don't need people that are talking heads. And we certainly don't need people that want to split and divide us from our friends and colleagues as we go forward in this world. We need people that are going to bring teams together for greater good and work to solve many of the challenges we do face in our society, and that's, I believe, true everywhere around the globe. I certainly hear it as I talk to executives that hire me to be their executive coach. I hear their concerns for that. I hear the challenges they face, whether it's in their organization or their demography of how they live and operate. But to dive into that idea of how does one become a better leader, I argue it is fundamentally it's not easy, it's not simple, but there are some clear steps I believe you can consider to start that journey. I do believe it all begins with leading yourself. You need to be able to take healthy analysis and do a healthy, informed review of where you are today. I have borrowed a page from the good folks who provide us with the Hogan assessment tools. Dr. Hogan clearly writes in his work that among leaders, there is an ever-present competition between identity and reputation. His definition for that is pretty profound in my humble opinion. The way Dr. Hogan defines identity, that's that self-talk that we all have. It's the story we tell ourselves when we're looking in the mirror, we're getting ready for work in the morning. We're sort of amping up and ramping up our ideas about what we believe, where we want to go, what we want to do. And that shapes this thing that becomes our sense of identity. And you can think about that also in terms of basically it's sort of your goal, your desire, how you believe you want to show up in the world. And that can be a good thing. That can be a good thing. Clearly, for some, it's not so healthy, it's not so good, and that's part of the conundrum that we all face. But I believe for many that are in the business world, the majority is fundamentally solid in trying to do the best they can for the greatest good they believe they can serve. But that whole package competes with reputation. And Dr. Hogan describes reputation as the perception that everybody around you has. You show up with this identity that you want to present, and you begin your work, you start talking to people, you start behaving certain ways, and all of that comes together to create for you a reputation. And, it's exactly the old phrase, perception is reality. The way people perceive how you show up is what compiles and creates your reputation. Smart and honest and good, well-meaning leaders will check that periodically, whether it's through a formal 360 review process or just a very informal feedback loop. They will question whether or not their reputation is matching up to the identity they've created, and they will try to work together to align those things, either learn from what could be wrong with their identity that needs to be adjusted, or pay attention to the the feedback they're getting about their reputation, and really challenge the idea, well, why? I know my identity is solid, it's good, pure, truth, beauty, and light, but somehow it's not coming across. So maybe it's part of the delivery, maybe it's part of the messaging, maybe it's just some behavior that it causes that disconnect. So it's always wise and important to check that. Now, when I call that the baseline work. When you've got that baseline work figured out, you also then need to challenge yourself as a leader with the fundamental question: if I could be one step up a better leader, what would that look like? And when I think about the one step up, I think it's very important that people commit to do that incremental growth, that incremental change to be better leaders. Because if you are, in fact, on some sort of management track and you are being asked to step up to new jobs, new promotions, new levels of service, you will always be challenged by that new role. And as Marshall Goldsmith famously says, what got you here won't get you there. So that suggests the need for an ongoing process to evaluate, measure, and make change to achieve the outcome that you really desire. So that becomes, again, a personal development discipline that has to be followed and committed to be able to keep you advancing the right way for that growth of becoming the better leader. I also argue that you can pretty much only do one step up at a time, because inevitably, when you do identify some opportunity for some change, the 1, 2, or 3 things you might identify that are needed represent pretty serious levels of work and commitment to get there. And you can't take on more than those couple at a time to truly affect the change that you might want to achieve that next step up. So it's wise, I believe, to keep your sights focused, do that analysis, figure out that baseline, and then challenge yourself with that question: what would I look like in one level up as a truly impactful, effective leader? And as you go through that process, there's going to be the need to create some definition and take a look at some attributes that maybe you haven't yet explored in your own capacity to be a leader. And for the purposes of explaining that, in my coaching, I frequently turn to a simple analogy that some people cringe, others kind of nod their head and go, oh yeah, oh yeah. The analogy I use has to do with the game of golf. I've written articles about it. I've published other messages on this topic, but I'll explain it to you right now real simply. In the game of golf, by regulation, you can have 14 clubs in the bag, and those golf clubs are each designed to serve a different purpose. Some hit the ball a little farther and lower trajectory. Others have giant looping loft to them. Now, obviously, that's assuming if you hit them correctly, and that is the big challenge in learning how to play golf, is to how to use those clubs specifically and properly for their intended purpose. But really good golfers, really highly skilled, competitive, professional golfers can take one club and they learn how to hit it multiple ways to take advantage of the design, what its intended purpose is, but tweak it just a little bit, adjust the shot just a little bit to get the outcome you need based on the situation that's laid in front of you. When you play golf, you hit the ball a certain place, and when you get down there where the ball sits and you're looking at your next shot, you may see trees, you may see water, you may see sand, you may see all manner of obstacles in your way, and you have to make a choice. You have to pick the right club and choose to hit it the right way to overcome that obstacle. I argue that leadership is fundamentally like that. Good leaders pack their leadership tool bag with multiple skills and abilities and talents that can be pulled out and used in the situation, depending on the situation. And great leaders know how to adjust that tool or that attribute to get the best outcome for the challenge that's immediately in front of them. It's a perfect analogy to the way we need to play golf. And I think that's true for leadership. So here's the trick, though. The way I came to this idea and this opinion about what defines good leadership, when I first started thinking about committing my energy and passion to being an executive coach, I asked myself the question, what is leadership? So I did what most do. I started Googling. I looked up keywords. I started doing some research, and I discovered that, there's quite a number of very well-known and highly respected authorities that have written books about leadership. So I started researching those books, and lo and behold, just about everybody who has credit as an authority on leadership, somewhere in their writing, they have built a list of attributes. They have said, good leaders have these 7 attributes, or these 12, or God love John Maxwell, 21 attributes that make up a good leader. And if you're going to be a good leader, you have to think about what those attributes may be and then do the work to challenge yourself to become the best you can possibly be at exercising each one of those attributes. And I also argue that it's not good to take somebody else's list and try to copy it, replicate it, because you, my friend, are uniquely made. You have a unique set of values, principles, and beliefs that have been crafted as you have matured and grown up in this world. And you need to decide for you what that list of attributes needs to be. You can do some study, you can do some research, you can certainly borrow some ideas from others. I mean, as an example, I think most people agree that to be an effective leader, you need to be a good communicator. That's a pretty common attribute that shows up on just about everyone's list when I challenge my clients to build their attribute list, build their leadership golf bag, start packing it with principles and skills. Communication is usually always there. Then people turn to things like integrity and trustworthiness, or respect for technical knowledge and skill. All of those are great and wonderful things, but they fit in different situations depending on who and what the person may be about. And, someone that, say, is a medical doctor, I certainly hope that they aspire to have a high level of technical capacity in what they do and what they can understand and how they can process diagnoses. And, that would be an attribute to set them up as a leader in their field. But, they also might need to balance that with the ability to have some empathy, have that bedside manner to connect with the patient and the patient's family and work through the drama of the moment of whatever the diagnosis may be. So those are unique examples of how this blend of attributes and skills come together uniquely and individually for all of us who strive to be better leaders. It's a very important dynamic, but it's a challenge that I think anyone who has been moved into a position of leadership should consider. Now, one thing I've talked about frequently on my show is the fact that in the modern business world, companies look at their workforce and they say, I need a team leader or I need a supervisor to run this team or this group. What is the common solution for that? They look out on the floor or look out across the team and they pick the best producer, the best individual contributor, the best salesperson, the smartest engineer, the most accurate accountant, whatever the function may be. They look at that individual contributor level of performance and they say, well, among all their peers, that's the best one. That's the person that ought to become the supervisor. Well, I'm sorry, my friends. Fundamentally, that's bad logic. It has value up to a point, but it is not an absolute correct choice to be made. Yet, hundreds of thousands of individuals have gotten onto a management career path just that way. And inevitably what happens, and sadly it's still true to this day, we haven't unilaterally across all sectors done a good job of changing that practice. Some companies are better than others. Some do a lot more in management development, high potential training, all of those things to get people ready to take on a supervisory or a management role. But that is still the lesser percentage of the world. It's not a vast majority. And what happens is then these individuals that are recognized that way, and kudos for you, good for you, congratulations. But you get on this management journey and you are thrust into the role of responsibility for leading these teams, and you really don't necessarily know exactly what you're doing. You kind of do a little bit of trial by fire, you're trial and error, you're learning on the fly, you're trying to get these things worked out, and sometimes it works great and works well. Other times it's not so good. But what can happen is very unfortunate habits and behaviors can rise up from that sort of process. And it's only after about the second or third, maybe even fourth promotion that the individual is given an opportunity for some Leadership development. Oh, let's get them a coach. Let's get them in a program. Let's build a cohort of these people and let's pull them together and let's teach them how to be better leaders. Well, that's great. I don't want to sound condescending on that approach. At least you're doing something to improve the long-term outcome of this idea. But sadly, in many cases, it's too little too late. Habits have been developed, mindsets have been locked in, behaviors have been formed, identities have been created. Back to my original point, identities have been created that aren't necessarily going to operate for the greater good. So, big challenge to fix all that, work through all that. And again, that's where some coaching can come in to help look at that person and quiz the framework that they may be operating with. You know, what do you believe in? What do you think? And where did your idea of leadership come from? Let's recalibrate, reset, rebuild all of that if we need to, and then we can move forward with more productivity, more impact, more benefit for others. So that's a lot in a little bit of time here. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a pivot here and start recapping, if I may, some of the themes that have come out of my shows, that first 300 that we've done. I think it would be safe to say that if you look back over my archive, you could probably slot my shows into 5 or 6 buckets of activity, and thinking. I don't do that formally per se. I mean, I do have, if you go to my website, which is podcast.dougthorpe.com, you'll see the archive there, and there are some categories listed for things that we've talked about and general topical trend lines. But I want to just kind of, off the top of my head, just kind of hit on a couple of the themes that continue to repeat, are very noteworthy, I believe, and things to think about. And in a classic, no particular order, this is not a top 10 list. We're going to count down. This is one of those famous no particular order lists. But the first one that always seems to come up, any client I deal with or any customer I may have, the idea is time management. And I actually had a guest, and I didn't go back to name the name, but I do recall vividly talking about the idea you don't really manage time. Time is just there. You know, you wake up, the clock is ticking, you do your work, the clock is ticking, you go to bed, the clock is ticking, time is there. The question is not about managing time. The question is managing your effort and your sense of the ability to create value with the time you've got. And I think that's a pretty profound separation of the confusion there that needs to be thought about. I do occasionally, when I'm working with clients and we start talking about this time challenge that some express, I asked them the fundamental question. Just think about it a minute, and I'm not asking you this to be judgmental or critical of your effort, but think about this. Why is it that somebody like Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs or Elon Musk does what they do in the same number of minutes and seconds in the day that I have, that you have, that we all have? Time is a commodity that we all share without adjustment for market value or geography or economic situation. It's a currency that exists globally. Everybody has the exact same tick on the clock. And why is it that some experience so much more productivity, so much more impact, so much more outcome than the rest of us? And if you start thinking about that a minute, it has to do with one of my favorite words, intentionality. How intentional are you with the time you have at hand? It's real easy to roll out of bed in the morning and kind of stretch and yawn and say, oh, I don't have a lot on my calendar today. That's great. I'm going to take a little bit extra time at breakfast. I'm going to read an extra couple of articles on social media. I'm going to go to my favorite news source. I'm going to look at my favorite YouTube. And you kind of delay your time start and all that. And next thing you know, it's already 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're going, oh, I better get busy. I need to do something. And it's so easy, and I'm over-exaggerating the dynamic here, obviously, but it's so easy. We have so many distractions at our disposal now that it is so incredibly easy to burn a lot of time and not get a lot done. Whereas if you take more of the big rock mentality, let me look on my landscape here. What are the really big things, the important things I need to chip away at today? If I'm going to accomplish my big goal for the year or my big goal for the quarter, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do today to get that started? Do I need to do something that's going to get me in a rhythm? Do I need to do something that's going to get me into a mindset? What is it? And be intentional about that. Be sure that if nothing else happens today, that thing happens. That's the way we start changing our behavior toward time. And as is so popularly depicted in a lot of, there's Sunday school lessons, there's TED Talks, there's videos. Stephen R. Covey did one about the rocks, pebbles, and sand. We can take a container, and if we properly fill it up with the big rocks first, then the smaller pebbles, then all the sand, we can get all of that content in that container, and that container represents our 24-hour day. But if you do it the other way around, if you take all that little stuff, all that sand, and you pack it in, and then you pour the pebbles in and level them out, you start packing the rocks in, they don't fit. There's always a rock or two, big ones, big issues, big ideas, big opportunities that don't fit and don't happen. But boy, you got all that other junk done. You got all that little stuff done. That's not productivity, my friend. It's just not. You might have successfully opened 400 emails today, but to what good does that serve? So think hard about flipping that script. Think about the mindset. You don't really manage time, but you can be intentional to operate your time with more purpose, and you will find yourself becoming more productive and better outcomes. So that's time. That's an issue about time. The other thing that does come up is the very popular, it's been written about often, the infamous imposter syndrome. It's a common plight that executive coaching clients inevitably bring to the table in one form or another. There's a few exceptions. I can think of a few of my coaching clients who profess not to really have a lot of concern about that. Not to say they haven't experienced it. It's just not a debilitating concern for them. But there are plenty of others that do bring that to our coaching times and say, how do I get through this? How do I get past this? This may sound incredibly overly simplistic, trite, insensitive, or whatever, but the truth is, my friend, if you feel that way, you are not alone. That's the very first thing you need to learn about the imposter syndrome. You in no way are alone. Anybody and everybody who has ever taken on a new role in leadership at some level experiences that feeling like I'm a little bit overwhelmed, or maybe I'm a whole lot overwhelmed with my new role, my new responsibility, and I'm afraid what could happen if anybody figures that out. If anybody figures out, I don't know what I'm doing here, what's that going to look like? And people do get paralyzed by that fear and that doubt and that idea that I don't know my boss well enough. I don't think I can have this talk with my boss. Who else can I go talk to? And they get really stuck. They get kind of overwhelmed, and that becomes a bit of a treadmill that is very hard to get off. But the place that I often start with people when we want to talk about this is think for a minute about your situation. What set up the situation you're in? Were you asked to step up and take on this role? Were you elected to the office by some process at the company? Were you appointed by some senior executive to take a seat at the table? If any of that is true, you've already been given a huge vote of confidence, and you need to try to grab onto that. You need to hang on to that idea that somebody somewhere made the decision to put you where you are. Now, I do realize occasionally there's some weird circumstances that thrust people into these seats, but by and large, a decision got made by someone in authority above you that said, you are the one. You need to be the one sitting in that seat next. And that should be remembered as a vote of confidence. They've already said yes to you. So things like going to the next meeting and feeling like you need to be the wallflower, sitting back, don't say too much because you don't know yet, you don't know what to talk about yet, all of that. Start working to realize somebody saw something there. And one of the quickest and best things you can do is if you can identify the people that said, I want you in this seat, then, my friend, you can go to that person and say, let's talk a little bit more about this decision. Tell me more about the consideration. What did you see that I may not be seeing about this opportunity for me to be the one in this role? And in that process, you might ask them to clarify a little more about expectation and opportunity that they see in you that they would believe you can fulfill. And that kind of becomes your North Star. That becomes your pathway of direction. So you can eliminate some of that kind of uncertainty and get straight on the path of where you need to be going. And I hope that helps to kind of bust through. There's a whole lot of other psychology. I had a guest that was an amazing guy that was on my show recently that we talked about that. And he wrote a book called Becoming the Mentally Strong Leader. And great material in it, good stuff to think about. Check that out in the archives, if you will. He talks a lot about that balance between fear and risk and all of those things that do drive some of that frustration and concern. It's really good stuff to think about. Going on my list here, number 3, let's see. I think a lot of what has been made popular of late is this notion of creating trust in the workplace. It's a topic that has bubbled up in the lexicon of leadership and management. Many books have been written about building trust in your team. You'll see on my shelf back here, a colleague and I, we wrote a book called Trust at Work. We ironically, we began working on that book before the pandemic and before Google published their famous study about psychological safety in the workplace. If you haven't read that report from Google, look it up under Project Aristotle by Google. It's a fascinating study. It was a 2-year study that Google embarked upon with the fundamental question of saying, why do some of our work teams perform so much better than other work teams when we know we hire the best of the best? Across the board, unilaterally, without exception, we hire the best people we can get for the jobs we've got. And yet, when we put those people on teams, not all the teams perform the same. That doesn't make any sense. What is the issue? And the study, Project Aristotle, delved into that, and they came away with a number of attributes and contributing factors. But the number one runaway winner is what they termed psychological safety. The ability to be on a team and feel trusted and be able to give trust to others during that team experience. So that means you can talk honestly, you can throw out an idea without fear of retribution or ridicule. All of that comes together. So their study really highlights and promotes the notion that leaders need to know or learn how to build this psychological safety, or in my common sense way of thinking, I read all that and I say, we're talking about trust. That's what we're really talking about. So my colleague and I, a friend named Roger Ferguson, his name's been used many times on my show, we wrote this book, Trust at Work. The basic premise in that work is that if you think at the most fundamental level about how do we build trust between each other, ultimately it comes down to the simple process of asking questions. We meet somebody new. Maybe if you go all the way back to your days or maybe you're there now if you're listening and you're younger and you're still looking for a life partner, you're meeting people, and the meeting process, the connecting process usually starts out fundamentally with a set of questions. What kind of food do you like? Where do you like to go? What do you like to do? What movies have you seen? What cars do you like to drive? What clothes do you like to wear? Just all these things are sort of data gathering. And if you really spent time thinking about it, the questions probably get grouped into different buckets. But ultimately, you're doing a process of kind of checking off in your own mind, can I relate to this person? Can I connect with this person? Do we have some common ground we can share? And even if we don't have a perfect match, are the things we don't agree on okay? I mean, is it okay not to agree about certain things? And that's a process, and we all go through it, we all live it. And as our good friends at B&I talk about, we do business with people we know, like, and trust. We don't really do big business with somebody or something we don't have some kind of trust for. And the way we build trust is probing and digging and asking questions. And even if you're one that likes to buy things online and the first thing you do is spend 20 minutes going through the reviews, guess what, my friend? You are asking questions. How does this product hold up? How hard is it to install? How difficult is it to assemble? Does it need batteries? How many colors does it come in? And what do they look like when they show up? All of those review data points are answers to questions, either literal or subconscious questions we've got. Well, in the book, my colleague and I, we address the fact that for leaders, building an environment of trust is shaping the landscape to allow your teams, your employees, to come forward, get their questions answered. It is a climate, it's a culture, it's an opportunity to really share with your people the open opportunity to have their questions answered. And you as a leader be sensitive to knowing that somewhere they've got a question. They may not have voiced it, they may not have perfectly articulated it, but if you're making an announcement or announcing a change or changing a policy or swapping out a machine, there's going to be questions. And you got to have those questions answered for your people to feel the highest level of trust they can about where the business is going. The book gets into a framework of 6 sets, 6 different segments that these questions come from or revolve around. And every time I've gone to a coaching engagement where I've been asked to present this to team level activities, we go through what the 6 buckets are, and then I play a game at the end after I get everybody understanding the principles. I say, all right, give me a situation, give me a problem you've got going on right now, and I'll show you that in the middle of that problem is some questions, and I'll show you where those questions go in this model, in these 6 slices. And inevitably, there's always a solution there. There's always some clarity that we get from that. And the light bulbs are going off. People are going, oh, that's why that's not working. Okay, thank you. So it's a great message. I've got a lot of information about it on my website if you want to hop over there and dig into it further, or if you'd like to just schedule a time with me to talk. And on that note, I know we're about up on time here. I really appreciate you guys coming in to hanging in with me as we do this talking head show, I guess I'll call it. I don't know. But hey, give me some feedback. Put a note in the comments whether you like this, if you'd prefer me to do this periodically or not. I'd be happy to think about that. As I said, I was encouraged to do this by several other pretty well-known podcasters that have taken a run at it and worked through it. But we'll try it out, see how you guys like it. If you don't ever want to hear me talking by myself again, let me know that too. I'm a big boy. I can take it. But for now, I'm going to sign off, say goodbye. Oh, two mentions. If you do want to get together and talk about any of these topics, or maybe learn a little more about some other ideas that I can share about growing your leadership effectiveness, hop over to my website at dougthorpe.com. There's contact pages there. There's buttons you can hit to reach out and get a hold of me. We'll schedule some exploratory time just to hear your story and learn what you're up against and what you'd like to explore. If I can't help you, I've got a huge network of really great professionals that have done a lot of wonderful things with folks and for folks. So happy to open that up if we need to. Second thing is, I do want to remind you, we've got a web version of this over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the video archives. You'll get all these other great prior to 300 shows we talked about and all those new coming up in the future. But with that, I'm going to sign off, say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.